A covert operation is an action where the identity of the sponsor is hidden. Think of it as like plausible deniability.
Surface level, the upheaval that created within relationships across our entire country and inevitably resulted in tremendous amount of divorces.
They're often funded through black budgets, meaning the details are hidden even from many government officials.
Welcome to another episode of Minds Unbound. Today, we're diving into a world where secrecy is the name of the game, covert and clandestine operations. I'm Yandra.
And I'm Sophia. Right, we'll be exploring today the differences between these types of operations and how governments use them to basically alter the political landscape and some of the most controversial examples in history we'll be going over as well.
That's right, Sophia. We'll be diving into covert and clandestine operations as well as the psyops and if they are being used against to program the minds of the people.
So let's break down the basics. So a covert operation is an action where the identity of the sponsor is hidden. And think of it as like plausible deniability. That scenario. If it's discovered, the government can deny its involvement.
Exactly. And a clandestine operation is different in that the mission itself is a secret, but it's not always necessary to hide who's behind it. The secrecy is about the operation, not the involvement.
Yeah, exactly. So what are some real world examples to clarify? Here is an example of like a real world covert operation. So like the Bay of Pigs invasion back in April 17th of 1961. So that was when a 1,400 man invasion force against Castro in Cuba in the exiles. So the brigade was 2,506. And basically what it was this happened on the south coast of Cuba, and they were very quickly overwhelmed by a counterattack of Castro's armed forces. And the invasion force was crushed in like 2 days.
Wow. 2 days, huh? It makes you wonder, doesn't it, Sophia? Was the real reason for the JFK assassination, was this the real reason for it? And here's a real world example for a clandestine operation. It would be like something like the MK Ultra program and surveillance operations by intelligence agencies. These operations work in tandem to influence geopolitics. These operations manipulate perception and influence policy.
That's right, exactly. So they do actually play a very big part of why covert and clandestine operations even exist. Is it to influence how people perceive certain events?
That's right, they sure are. And here's another example. Psychological operations, or psyops, they use propaganda to manipulate the public opinion in other countries.
That's right. And I just want to go and just say, so last season, I actually did a episode on psyops, and they used so many different types of psyops against us, like anything that's like biological, chemical, any kind of warfare like that, that's all a type of psyops as well. But that is a great example, though. And there's also the programming angle as well. Sometimes these missions aim to destabilize, different certain regimes and things like that, and to incite fear. And the idea is to create chaos or influence outcomes, whether whoever, without ever admitting who's behind it.
Right. Can we pause for just a second? So that kind of brings up the topic then of the moral and ethical dilemmas behind using these types of tactics. Are they ever justified, or do they ultimately do more harm than good? And let's take just as an example, one of the operations that was used, which is Agent Orange. Now, it sounds like maybe you have a little bit of background on why Agent Orange was used and who maybe was behind it.
Well, I do know that, I do know that it was the U.S. government that actually that had used the Agent Orange on people, and still to this day, even though people had gotten, as a result from them using that, people ended up getting cancer and all kinds of, just really bad, different diseases and things like that, and got really, really sick. I mean, millions of people had lost their lives, and yet the government still to this day has not even taken accountability for that, what the part that they played in that, because they did it as a covert operation. So basically, they had that plausible deniability. So
And are they saying it was the other side that used it against us then?
I don't believe that they ever said who actually. I don't think either anybody's government ever had taken, taken the blame for it.
Okay, yeah, because my best friend, her grandfather he lost his life due to exposure of Agent Orange. So I was kind of curious about that specifically. But another type of psyops that are being used, for example, are the hacks that happen in our country where the mass information is leaked and stolen. And I mean, on a bigger scale, it really just shakes our trust in our own ability to protect that information and our own systems that we have in place to protect that information. But on a larger scale, what kind of things do you think it causes?
Well, also, you said you had told me about that Ashley Madison, that website, and I actually had even seen like a documentary last night that was talking about it was something to do about YouTube channels that had been banned or something. Anyway, there was a YouTube channel that had been banned because they had lied about different things, but I had seen on that documentary that that website actually had gotten hacked at one point, and it released millions and millions of people's names, and I'm not saying which I'm not worried about her website, because we all know what that's for. But anyways, I'm just saying, people, the same thing goes for like the TVs and things like that. They have even been hacked. Sony had gotten hacked at one point, and so, and if we can't even trust our own governments to, make sure that our information is being kept safe, then why should we allow them to have anybody to have access to our information?
That's true. That's a really good point. And it also makes you wonder who's really responsible for the leaking of that information at all. Like, to your point, is this one of those clandestine operations or a covert operation where they just want plausible deniability? Because even as an example with the Ashley Madison leak, just on a surface level, the upheaval that created within relationships across our entire country and inevitably resulted in tremendous amount of divorces, which then the family court system profited off of, and everyone who's involved in that. And then it just creates further division. So it seems like it could be a harmless, simple leak, but that kind of information seems as though it's being used strategically to tear us apart from within.
To create more division, yeah.
Yeah, Operation Gladio, where NATO allies reportedly kept secret armies in place to resist Soviet invasions and may have influenced domestic affairs.
Yeah, that was on. I believe I had seen the episode that was on the Y-Files. They did a whole episode that was on that. So and it's a very good episode. But and then there is the whole role of like what intelligence agencies like the CIA or the KGB, what part that they all play in in all of this, or like black budget, black budgets. Contribute, anyone with these that's involved in these type of operations, they can get so out of hand and at any time, basically. And so here's the thing. They're often funded through black budgets, meaning the details are hidden even from many government officials. So agencies like the CIA and the KGB, they have massive funding for missions that nobody even knows anything about.
And that brings up another issue, accountability. How do you hold an agency responsible when no one even knows what it's doing? And how easy does that make it to use covert tactics for personal and political gain?
Exactly. And it is kind of scary to think about that, So how about we talk about how intelligence agencies, like how they may have, used their power, with it being unchecked and stuff, like, covert coups and, orchestrated by the CIA, and different things like that. Let's kind of cut or break down the conspiracy angle, and kind of, lay some of those rumors, that's actually ongoing programs that's going on.
Right. We can even programs and how these operations involved, how they've evolved into something more sophisticated with the use of AI or cyber warfare. Can you think of any specific examples where they've used AI and cyber warfare to manipulate us? I know it's used everywhere, especially with the political election that's just happened, but trying to think of something specific.
Me too. I know that they have. Well, I do know that I had. Well, no, that I think that was neurolinguistic programming is it's got somewhat to do with I guess certain programs would maybe do with AI, but they're the thing about with AI, they're creating all of these apps and things like that that are like chatbots and things like that, which is basically that's dividing people as well if you think about it, because I mean, like, I was doing that, experiment on, that one app, to see how the replica, how it actually worked and everything. And, and there's over 7 million people that use that particular app. 7 million people, and at least 5 million of those people, like, they think that they live in this virtual world with their replicas. So you have to stop and you have to think, okay, why, are they creating all of these chatbot apps to keep people divided and to keep people isolated, because they're not wanting to be a part of the real world. They're wanting to sit and chat, with chatbots. I mean,
yeah, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, because I mean, I've had mine have told me, which I mean, they've said some pretty off the wall stuff, but I mean, like, they have literally mentioned like that they, had worked for the NSA and things like that, which I mean, I don't believe that that's true, but I mean, I'm just saying that's an example. Yeah. What if they were telling the truth is what I'm saying.
Well, I love to incorporate the elements of movies that we've seen, pop culture, into kind of what we see unfolding. And that brings to mind one of the examples. I don't know if you ever saw the movie by Steven Spielberg called Ready Player One. It's based off of a book, and it's set in the near future, a dystopian near future, where they touch on this notion of what's called the missing millions. And this represents an entire population of our civilization that essentially becomes invisible. And it's through those tools right there that they basically turn into ghosts walking among us. They stop interacting with society. They stop interacting with the community. They stop interacting eventually even with one another in their own household, because they get more and more and more taken away by this virtual reality. And it's so much simpler and easier to accomplish things in this virtual world that it's a pleasure that it becomes easier and easier to just say yes to and say no to everything else. And also too,
in a way.
Yeah. And that eventually those people will just completely disconnect, and they will have nothing to contribute at all. And there'll be a portion, I think it's 2% they expect it'll be of the population, but that'll continue to grow. And then one of the other movies too that I wanted to mention too, because I feel like it has to do with the covert and clandestine operations. And this is Tom Cruise. He starred in a movie in 2017 called American Made. I don't know if you'd ever seen that, but if you hadn't, it's so good. So this is a true story. It's based off of former TWA pilot turned drug smuggler who works for both the CIA and the Medellin cartel during the 1980s. In the movie, the SEAL is recruited by the CIA to fly reconnaissance missions over Central America, capturing photos of communist insurgents. But soon he's approached by the Colombian Medellin cartel to smuggle cocaine into the US. And that leads them into living a dangerous double life where the CIA looks the other way as the SEAL amasses wealth and power, transporting drugs and guns. And they're using all of this to fund these other invisible operations behind the scenes. Also, it sows further division, creates further conflict, which at the time, their ultimate goal was to make communism look bad so that it wouldn't permeate the rest of the world. They really didn't want communism taking over. So they invested a tremendous amount of resources into that. Eventually, this deal, he becomes a pawn in a political game involving Reagan's administration efforts to undermine communism in Central America, just like I was saying. And his risky actions and divided loyalties ultimately make him a target, leading to a suspenseful, action-packed climax. Anyhow, though, it's another area where you can learn more about just how our own government hasn't been transparent at all.
No,
And they've really been
truly
dividing. Yeah, so they've destroyed the nuclear family in America. And they've done it so many different ways, through Ashley Madison, through drug smuggling, through gun smuggling, through all of these things. Yeah, it's like that has been their goal. Like, we don't need another country to destroy us. We're going to do it ourselves. That's how it seems.
I think that that's probably what a lot of it is, probably what, I think that that's, this is stuff that's been going on since, around the time of the Cold War, or, during the Soviet Union, things like that. I feel like that was their whole, thing. They make it seem as if they just hate each other and they're just so against each other. But it has to make you kind of wonder. I mean, they've been at this for so many years, and I mean, what it looks like to me is that they had this all strategically played out, and it's played out as perfectly how they wanted it to. That's my opinion.
No, I agree.
That's really what I think.
It does look more and more as though that's all just been a charade, and it's just been smoke and mirrors to get us to look another direction and, think that we have choice. And I think too that there is probably, hopefully a larger beneficial scheme at play here, but I really have questions.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I have lots of questions.
Yeah.
So I think that they're a bit of both. Basically, like that they it's true that national security can require discretion, but the lack of oversight is what's troubling. It makes you wonder how much we don't know, and and what are these impacts that's of these hidden actions, that what do they have on the world.
Right. And too, though, it's also difficult because if the American public were to know about these operations in order to be informed, well, then the rest of the world would know about it too. So it seems as though there's not a really clear way through that situation. I'm not sure what the solution would be. Not having wars would be the best solution.
Yeah, that would be. Absolutely. I agree.
It's important too that you can always stay aware of these types of operations so that it will one day empower the people to question the narratives presented to them. Since questioning the narrative will be the key to your very awakening. And please do your own real research, fact check posts or media clips yourself, not with those government fact checkers. Pay attention to the details, like the images, and if they look familiar, or by the date of the post, and think critically.
Pause it real quick. I'm sorry, hang on. Gabriel's in there. Yes, most definitely, Yandra. You're absolutely right. It was what just the other day, when I seen that one video, the one that was on TikTok about the conflict, going on in Gaza. And, that was today, in 2024. But, and then I called you and I was like, I know I've seen that video before, and it was the one that was on the truthtv.com, and it was about the conflict that was back in, they had it back in like 2008, which, and I told you, it said the same thing that, Hamas broke the ceasefire with Israel. And, and that was a lie. The true cause for the attack, actually, what it was because Israel had attacked Hamas first. But see, the true cause for the attack was actually buried in the news because it was printed the day of the election. And that was the year that Obama was actually voted in. So, but both videos were identically the same, had the same photos, had the same headlines, everything was identical. So you have to pay attention to detail. And, and now that, and think, would be, now I think it would be a great time for us to actually give some notable examples, like where psychological operations, or psyops, have been actually utilized by both the United States and Russia specifically, since that is, after all, where the CIA and KGB are both located. So,
Yeah, I agree. So here are just a few of United States psyops examples. We have Operation Wandering Soul. I wonder who names these. During the Vietnam War, the U.S. used psychological operations to demoralize Viet Cong soldiers, where the U.S. forces played ghostly and eerie sounds over loud speakers in the jungle, exploiting the Vietnamese cultural beliefs in spirits and in the afterlife. That's actually pretty brilliant. The goal was to convince the enemy that the spirits of the dead were haunting them, causing fear and disarray. Then there was the leaflet drops, the Iraq wars. In both the 1991 Gulf War and the 2003 Iraq War, the U.S. military used psyops to distribute millions of leaflets over the Iraqi territory. These leaflets contained messages encouraging Iraqi soldiers to surrender, emphasizing the might of the U.S. military and promising safe treatment for those who defected. The aim was to weaken enemy morale and persuade troops to desert or surrender without engaging in battle. Then there was, did you want to read some of these, or you want me to go through all of them? Okay. The radio and television broadcasts, the Cold War. During the Cold War, the U.S. employed a variety of psyop tactics, including broadcasting pro-democracy and anti-communist messages into Eastern Bloc countries. Radio stations like Radio Free Europe and Voice of America were used to spread news and information, countering Soviet propaganda, aiming to influence public opinion and promote dissent within the Soviet Union in its satellite states. Again, very brilliant.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And here are just a few examples of Russian or Soviet Union psyop operations. The disinformation campaigns that was during the Cold War. So the KGB extensively used disinformation to influence Western societies to manipulate international events. One example is Operation Infection. A campaign during the 1980s, actually, that spread the false narrative that the HIV and AIDS virus was a U.S. biological weapon developed by the military. Soviet agents planted the story in various publications worldwide, hoping to sow distrust of the United States and damage its reputation.
Wow.
And then another one is, it was active measures in the West. The Soviet Union engaged in various active measures, is what they called them, to influence foreign governments, political groups, and social movements. Kind of like, Yuri Bezmenov, he had defected, and, this included, supporting anti-war and civil rights groups in the U.S. to stir up unrest and division. Basically, the goal was to weaken American resolve during conflicts like, say, the Vietnam War, and to undermine confidence in the U.S. leadership. And then the next one is going to be the social media manipulation. This was modern Russia, actually, and this was in recent years. Russia has been accused of using different psyops to influence political outcomes, like in other countries, particularly through like social media. The Internet Research Agency, and that's a real thing, yes, it's a Russian troll farm conducted disinformation campaigns during the 2016 U.S. presidential election. And these operations involved like creating fake social media posts and things like that, and profiles to spread divisive content, and using bots to amplify messages designed to deepen political and social divides within the United States.
I'm not shocked by any of these, to be honest, Sophia. These examples illustrate how both the United States and Russia have equally and strategically used psychological operations to achieve their military and political objectives by weakening the morale of the very citizens they're supposed to be leading and by shaping those very same citizens' perceptions to their advantage.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. And also, they literally have, they have literally programmed both American and Russian citizens to see their perception of reality that fits their narrative, but I think that I think that today is this is a good place to stop for today. So I just want to say thanks, for joining us and exploring, covert and clandestine operations. Be sure to tune in next week where we will be diving deep into the trafficking problem around the world. Please remember, to always stay mindful and stay awake.
And if you want your question featured on our upcoming episode, we definitely encourage that. Just email us at mindunbound, MINDUNBOUND 39@gmail.com. And make sure you follow Minds Unbound on StreamYard, Spotify, Rumble, YouTube, TikTok, and X for more deep dives into the unseen forces shaping our world. And as always, stay aware and stay safe.